Amaka had dreamed of this day since she was a little girl. She imagined walking down the aisle in a beautiful white dress, surrounded by love, music, and laughter. And today it was finally happening. Her dress sparkled under the lights, her makeup was perfect, and her heart was full of excitement, or at least it should have been. As people turned to look at her, she smiled, but deep inside something felt off. The church was packed. Friends, family, and even distant relatives had come from far and wide to witness the big day. The choir sang softly. The scent of fresh roses filled the air. It all looked like a fairy tale. Tunde, her fiancé, had promised her forever. He said she was the only woman he had ever truly loved. He made her believe that this was their destiny, that they were meant to be. But as she stood near the church entrance, holding her bouquet tightly, her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it at first. After all, who checks their phone on their wedding day? But the buzzing continued. Something told her to look. Just one glance. She slowly opened her bag and checked the screen. One message, from an unknown number. Her hands began to tremble as she read the words. Don't go in. Tunde isn't who you think he is. Her heart dropped. Her breath caught. The smile faded. Everything around her started to blur. The music, the people, the lights. Suddenly, the dream didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt like a warning. The music had changed. The choir was singing louder now. The guests had all taken their seats. The church looked perfect, decorated with white and gold, candles glowing, flowers everywhere. Everyone was waiting for one thing, the groom. But time kept ticking, and Tunde was nowhere to be seen. At first, people thought maybe he was running late, or maybe there was some small delay. But then whispers started spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Tunde hasn't arrived. Has anyone seen the groom? He's not answering his phone. Amaka stood at the church entrance, still in her dress, bouquet shaking slightly in her hand. Her heart beat faster with each passing second. Her best friend whispered to her, trying to stay calm, but panic was growing. Amaka looked at her father. His jaw was clenched, his arms crossed tightly. Her mother sat in the front pew, quietly crying, trying to hold back tears. The joy and celebration were melting away, replaced with confusion, concern, and growing embarrassment. Then her phone rang. The entire room went silent as Amaka looked down at the screen. It was Tunde. With shaky fingers, she picked up. Hello. There was silence at first. Then his voice came, soft but clear. I'm sorry. I'm marrying Bisola instead. Just like that. No explanations. No apologies beyond the first two words. No emotion. Her world stopped. She didn't even realize the phone had slipped from her hand and hit the floor. For a few seconds, she couldn't move. Her body was frozen. Her ears rang. Her heart felt like it had shattered into pieces. Bisola? Bisola was her distant cousin. Someone she had helped get a job months ago. Someone she had trusted. The betrayal hit like a slap. People started murmuring again. Some guests gasped. Others looked away in discomfort. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. The news would spread within minutes. Amaka's knees almost gave out, but she stood still, trying not to collapse under the weight of shame and heartbreak. She felt exposed, like the whole world was watching her fall apart. And maybe they were. What was supposed to be the happiest day of her life had just turned into the most painful, most humiliating moment she'd ever known. All eyes were still on her, but not for the reason she had dreamed of. She didn't cry. Not yet. She couldn't. Her body was too numb. But inside, something had broken. And she knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. Amaka couldn't hold it together any longer. As soon as she was away from the crowd, she broke down completely. She ran into the bridal suite, slammed the door shut, and locked it behind her. Her hands were shaking, her chest tight. She sank to the floor, right there in her wedding dress, and cried like a child. The beautiful makeup that had taken hours to perfect was now smudged, streaked with tears. Her lipstick was gone. Her lashes were falling off. Everything was ruined, not just her face, not just the wedding, but her heart. She kept hearing his voice in her head. I'm marrying Bisola instead. Over and over, like a cruel echo. Bisola. Of all people. Not a stranger, not some random woman, but Bisola. Her own blood. Her cousin. The same Bisola she had invited into her home when she moved to the city. The one she helped get a job. The one she gave clothes to when she was struggling. Amaka had opened doors for her, trusted her, loved her like a sister. And this was how she repaid her. The betrayal burned. It was sharp, cold, and deep. Outside the bridal suite, there were knocks, soft voices, people asking if she was okay. But she didn't answer. She couldn't. She just curled up on the floor, hugging herself, trying to understand how everything went so wrong. The noise of the guests leaving, the quiet gossip, even her mother's cries, she heard it all from behind that locked door. And then came the worst part, the media. Within an hour, it was already online. Runaway groom shocks guests in Lagos wedding drama. Bride left at the altar as groom marries cousin. Heartbreak and betrayal. Amaka's wedding nightmare. People she didn't even know were commenting, laughing, sharing her pain like it was entertainment. Her shame had gone viral. But while the world expected her to collapse and disappear, something unexpected began to happen. After hours of crying, something inside her shifted. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. Or maybe it was the tiny spark of strength that had always been there, just buried under all the pain. She stood up. Her legs were still weak, but she stood. She walked over to the mirror and looked at her face, messy, swollen, and broken. But also alive, breathing, still here. Amaka realized she had a choice. She could let this moment define her, or she could rewrite the story. Everyone thought this would destroy her, that she would hide, that she would never show her face again. But they didn't know her. Not really. Because while her heart had collapsed, she had not. And she was just getting started. As the last of the guests quietly left the venue, the once joyful wedding hall now felt cold and empty. Amaka sat alone in the dressing room, her white dress now wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. The chaos had died down, but her heart still felt like it was breaking all over again. The silence around her was loud. And in that silence, a gentle knock came at the door. She didn't answer. She didn't care who it was. But the door opened slowly anyway, and in walked someone she barely expected, Chief Okizi. He was Tunde's boss. Rich, respected, and powerful. Everyone in business circles knew his name. Amaka had only met him once, briefly, when he came to one of Tunde's events. She had assumed he left early like most of the VIPs did when the drama started. But here he was, standing in front of her, calm and composed. "I didn't come to see the wedding," he said softly. "I came to see you." Amaka blinked, confused and too exhausted to respond. She was sure he had only come to save face, or maybe to distance himself from the scandal. But instead, he walked over and gently placed a small bottle of water in her hand. "You don't deserve what happened today, but how you carried yourself. Even in all this pain, you didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't fall apart in front of them. That's strength," he said. No one had said that to her yet. Not once. Everyone else had looked at her with pity, sadness, or even gossip in their eyes. But not him. She didn't speak much, but she nodded. And for the first time all day, she felt a little less alone. "Let me take you home," he offered. Normally, she would have said no. But her feet were sore, her head was pounding, and honestly, she didn't want to go alone. So she agreed. The ride was quiet at first. She stared out the window, lost in thought, while he drove calmly through the evening traffic. But then slowly they started talking. Just small things, how she met Tunde, what her dreams had been, the business idea she and Tunde had once talked about building together. To her surprise, Chief Okizi listened, really listened. When they reached her apartment, he didn't just drop her off. He parked. "Can I buy you a coffee?" he asked. Not as a boss. Not as anything else. Just as someone who respects what you've been through. She hesitated but nodded. Maybe she needed that coffee more than she realized. That one coffee turned into two. Then into long conversations, texts, and quiet meetings over the next few weeks. He wasn't just kind, he was sharp, thoughtful, and had an eye for business. And for the first time since her world crashed, Amaka felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, seen. What started as an unexpected gesture was quietly turning into the beginning of something bigger. Something she hadn't planned. But maybe, just maybe, something even better. Amaka had always been more than just a pretty face or someone's fiancé. Long before the wedding disaster, she had been working quietly on something special, a business idea that had come from her heart and mind. She and Tunde were supposed to launch it together. She had done most of the research, made the plans, created the model. Tunde had the connections, but Amaka had the vision. So when everything fell apart, she didn't just lose a man, she lost what she thought was their future. At least, that's what she believed, until Chief Okizi came into the picture. Over coffee and conversations, the chief started asking her deeper questions. Not about Tunde or the wedding drama, but about her ideas, her goals, and her plan. At first, she was careful. She wasn't sure how much to share. But something about him made her feel safe, respected, like he actually cared about what she had to say. One day, after a long meeting in his office, he said something that changed everything. "You're not just smart, Amaka. You're strategic. You see things most people miss." That sentence stayed with her. Encouraged, Amaka decided to show him the business proposal she had been working on, the same one she once shared with Tunde. It was focused on tech solutions for small businesses in Nigeria, simple tools that could help vendors manage sales, track expenses, and grow faster. Most people thought it was too ambitious, too risky, but not the chief. He studied every page carefully. Then he looked up at her and smiled. "This is gold," he said. "And I want in." Amaka could hardly believe it. For so long, she had felt invisible behind Tunde's shadow, like the brains behind the scenes who never got any credit. But now, here she was sitting across from one of the most powerful businessmen in the country. and he was offering her a seat at the table. Within weeks, everything moved fast. She was no longer walking into his office as the bride who got left behind. She walked in with confidence, with purpose, as his business partner. She got her own team, her own office space. Her name was finally on the document. The company she once dreamed of was becoming real, not because of Tunde, but because of her. And the best part? She was building it on her own term. No one was handing her pity. No one was giving her a favor. She had earned this. Every meeting, every late night, every idea came from her own grit and grace. People who once laughed at her were now trying to get a seat at her table. The same media that once mocked her wedding story now ran headlines like, "From heartbreak to CEO, Amaka's comeback." The deal of a lifetime didn't just save her. It revealed her true power. And for the first time in a long while, Amaka looked in the mirror and smiled, not because of who was standing beside her, but because of who she had become. Amaka didn't just bounce back, she rose. With Chief Okizi by her side as both mentor and investor, she poured everything she had into building her own company. This time, it wasn't just a dream on paper. It was real. She worked day and night, attending meetings, building a team, perfecting her product, and making tough decisions. She had learned her lessons the hard way, but now she was wiser, stronger, and fearless. She named the company Noratech, after her late grandmother who used to sell vegetables in the local market. Amaka always remembered how her grandmother struggled with records, money, and stock. So she designed tech tools that could help small business owners like her. Simple, affordable, and powerful. The market responded fast. People loved it. Her idea was fresh, and her energy was unstoppable. But she didn't stop there. She remembered the people Tunde had fired without a second thought. Loyal, hardworking staff who were left jobless when his ego got in the way. Amaka called them one by one. She offered them jobs, better pay, and a chance to grow. They didn't hesitate. They knew Amaka was different. She valued people. And then came the contracts. She found out Bisola had fumbled a major deal with a big retail client. Without even trying to steal it, Amaka's name came up as a recommendation, and she closed the deal within days. More started rolling in. Big names, big money. Clients said they trusted her because she had a heart with a brain behind it. Soon, her name was everywhere. Jilted bride turned CEO. The woman they left behind now leads the future. Meet Amaka, the storm after the storm. It was wild. People who once whispered about her wedding drama were now talking about her boardroom win. Tunde's friends, who once mocked her, were now sending her emails with business proposals. Some even asked for jobs. Bisola's name slowly faded from social circles, while Amaka's rose higher and higher. She attended high-level conferences, sat on panels, gave speeches, and even mentored young women trying to break into tech. The same media that once laughed at her pain now followed her every move with admiration and awe. And still, she remained humble. She knew where she came from. She knew the pain it took to get here. And she never let success make her forget. People asked her how she did it, how she survived that kind of public heartbreak. Amaka always smiled and said, "They thought they buried me, but I was a seed." She wasn't just rising. She was leading. She was building. And she had become a name the business world didn't just respect. They feared it. Because the woman they left behind, she didn't stay behind. She became unstoppable. Years had passed, and Amaka's life looked nothing like it once did. Her company had grown beyond anything she had imagined. She had offices in 3 cities, a staff of over 100, and her face was now on magazine covers. Not as a bride, but as a boss. She had rebuilt herself completely. The heartbreak, the shame, the whispers, all of it felt like a distant memory. A chapter she had closed and outgrown. One morning, while sipping tea in her office, her assistant walked in with a small envelope, cream-colored, gold-trimmed, and sealed with a wax stamp. It looked fancy. Amaka took it with mild curiosity, opened it slowly, and immediately let out a soft laugh. It was a wedding invitation. And not just any wedding, it was Tunde's. She raised her eyebrows, amused. After everything, he was trying again? She read through the card. The wedding was being held at a luxury resort, clearly expensive. The bride's name wasn't Bisola. So the rumors had been true. Their relationship didn't last. No surprise there. 2 people who built something on lies hardly ever last. But what truly made Amaka pause was the guest list attached inside. Or rather, one name printed right next to hers, Chief Okizi. She stared at it for a moment, then smiled. Because this time, he wasn't just a guest. He was her fiancé. Yes, her fiancé. Somewhere along the way, in between building a business and rebuilding her life, Amaka and Chief Okizi had grown closer. What started with coffee turned into friendship, then into trust, and finally into love. Not rushed, not flashy, but real, rooted in deep respect and quiet understanding. He never treated her like a broken woman. He saw her strength from day one and helped her see it too. And in return, Amaka gave him something he didn't even know he needed, a partner who challenged him, inspired him, and stood as his equal. They had announced their engagement quietly, with no big headline. Just a soft photo on Amaka's private page, her hand in his, both wearing simple gold bands. The world had reacted with shock, admiration, and of course gossip. But Amaka didn't care. She was happy, genuinely happy. Now, looking at Tunde's invitation, she couldn't help but smirk again. How strange life could be. Once upon a time, she had stood waiting for Tunde at the altar, heart full of love and eyes full of tears. Now, she was walking into his wedding with the very man he once looked up to and secretly feared. She wasn't going to cause a scene. That wasn't her style anymore. But just showing up, elegant, calm, and powerful, with Chief Okizi by her side, that was enough. It wasn't revenge. It was a quiet reminder. She had won. In life, in love, in legacy. And she didn't have to say a single word. The sun was warm. The flowers were fresh. The music floated softly through the air. The venue shimmered with elegance. White roses, golden lights, and the soft scent of vanilla filling the space. Everything was perfect. But this time, it wasn't for Tunde. It was for Amaka. She stood at the entrance of the aisle, dressed in the most stunning ivory gown, simple, elegant, and powerful. Her hair flowed gently down her back, her makeup soft and glowing. But it wasn't the dress or the jewelry that made people stare. It was her peace, her confidence, her glow. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't nervous. She was ready. As the music swelled, Amaka began to walk, hand in hand with the man who stood tall beside her, Chief Okizi. The same man Tunde once rolled his eyes at, calling him too old school and out of touch. The same man Tunde never knew would one day become the love of Amaka's life. Gasps filled the room. People turned to each other, whispering in disbelief. Some clapped. Some just watched in awe. This wasn't just a wedding. It was a moment. A full circle, unforgettable moment. Tunde was there too, sitting near the front, frozen. His eyes followed Amaka's every step. He hadn't expected this. Not like this. He thought he had moved on, but seeing her now, beautiful and untouchable, beside the man who once signed his paychecks, it stung. Deep. Beside him, Bisola sat in a pale pink dress, her face stiff, her smile forced. But as Amaka walked past, never looking their way, something broke inside her. She stood up quietly and slipped out of the room, holding back tears. She couldn't take it. She had stolen the man, but lost the game. Lost the chance to be part of this moment. This victory. Amaka didn't flinch. She didn't look back. She reached the altar with grace, locking eyes with Chief Okizi, who looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "You look like magic," he whispered. She smiled. "You helped me remember who I am." The vows were short but deep. There were no over-the-top promises, no fairy tale line. Just two strong souls, choosing each other with full hearts and clear minds. When they were pronounced husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. But for Amaka, the loudest moment was the silence right before. The moment she knew, deep in her soul, that she had truly healed. This wasn't about showing off. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her story, in her own way. And as she turned to walk down the aisle, now as a wife, not to the man who betrayed her, but to the man who believed in her, she held her head high. Because this time, the bride wasn't broken. She was complete. Amaka didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any insult ever could. While the world watched her rise from the ashes, she remained calm, focused, and graceful. She had nothing to prove, because the result said it all. After the wedding, Amaka returned to work as usual. There were no bragging posts, no interviews about the past, and definitely no shade thrown at anyone. She didn't have time for that. She was too busy running a company, leading a team, signing deals, and changing lives. But behind the scenes, something powerful was happening. Her company, Noratech, had grown so big it was ready to expand into new sectors. One of the businesses they were set to acquire just happened to be the company Tunde once owned, the one he had started before things with Bisola fell apart. It was barely surviving. Contracts had dried up. Reputation had dipped. Investors had walked away. Tunde was still there, working quietly in a mid-level role. No leadership title. No real control. Just an ordinary man in a company he once called his kingdom. And now Amaka owned part of it. She didn't walk in to humiliate him. She never sent an email with his name on it. But everyone in that building knew exactly who she was, and exactly who he had lost. Not just as a fiancé, but as a force. Tunde avoided her name like a curse. He turned the other way whenever her face came up on business blogs or news channels. Deep down, he knew. He had dropped gold and picked up dust. And now, that dust had blown away, leaving him with nothing. Bisola? Her name had slowly faded from social circles. The same people who once gossiped with her now ignored her. She had tried to ride Tunde's wave, but it crashed too soon. She had no company, no credibility, and no real connections. Her betrayal had cost her everything. And now, she was just a sad footnote in a story that no longer included her. Meanwhile, Amaka was busy doing what she loved, leading, building, and giving back. She didn't spend her energy on payback. Instead, she invested in peace. She created a foundation in her mother's name to support young women in business. She funded scholarships for girls who wanted to study tech. She donated to mental health programs for women recovering from trauma and heartbreak. People admired her, not just for what she built, but how she built it, with quiet power, with kindness, with purpose. Her wedding disaster had once been the talk of the town. Now it was just a memory, a distant, blurry page in a story that had moved far beyond it. Amaka had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into brilliance, and heartbreak into an empire. And as for Tunde and Bisola, they became exactly what they deserved to be, a fading memory in the legacy of the woman they once underestimated. Amaka didn't gloat. She didn't post any "look at me now" messages. She didn't throw shade. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than revenge, and her success was already doing all the talking. Instead of looking back, Amaka focused on building forward. She quietly took a large portion of the money that was once saved for her ruined wedding, the food, the hall, the music, the decorations, and used it to start something powerful, a women's empowerment fund. It was her way of turning pain into purpose. She named it after her mother, who had always been her biggest supporter. The Mama Nora Foundation was born, a safe space for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, heartbreak, or failure. It offered free business training, mental health support, small grants, and mentorship. Women from across the country applied. Some had been cheated, others had been forgotten, but now they had a chance to rise, just like Amaka had. She showed up at events not to shine, but to serve. No designer gowns, no cameras in her face, just her heart, her voice, and her mission. As for Tunde and Bisola, they were no longer a topic in her world. People brought up their names from time to time, but Amaka never reacted. Not because she'd forgotten, but because she had outgrown them. They were no longer villains in her story. They were just a lesson, a chapter. The empire Amaka built didn't come from spite, it came from strength. And in that quiet power, she found something even better than payback. Peace.